Welcome to Nerds Amalgamated, a podcast that covers the latest events in science, pop culture, and gaming.
I'm the professor, aspiring game developer, sci-fi aficionado, and completely and undeniably a geek trying to take over the world. I'll be breaking down the news from tech to gaming.
I am the DJ, a humble nerd, a big weeb,
and a watcher from the halls of the multiverse.
Just kidding. Anyways, I'll be breaking down all things comics to movies to anime.
Join us and stay hydrated as we quench you with witty banter, unintentionally hilarious hot takes, and trivia more fun than a night at the pub, courtesy of Nerds Amalgamated.
And welcome to another episode of Nerds Amalgamated. Man, what a beautiful week it has been. All sunshines and rainbows and birds and bees.
No. Terrible. Stay inside.
Dude, this isn't COVID times. We passed through the COVID times. Well, I will agree with you since two of the most terrible things have come out. That was the Snow White movie and Assassin's Creed Shadows. And man, they have been terrible. Have you seen the stuff that's been out after the release?
I've seen the Rotten Tomatoes reviews for Snow White, and honestly, I've seen far worse.
What's funny with the Rotten Tomatoes thing is the fact that even though the critics are on surface level, they said that the critics hate it, but it's 71% of the audience liked it. But when you investigate it further, it's verified audience, it's 71%, but the rest of it, everybody hates it. It's like 22% or something. I'm like, oh, that's painful. And then Assassin's Creed Shadows, on the other hand, man, that's splitting the internet up a lot. But anyways, on to our topic. So we've got the anime boom incoming. Smash Bros. Creator goes based. And can the body survive in space?
You're too old to say based.
I'm not.
Yes, you are.
Uh-huh.
Stop pretending you can fit in with the kids. You can't.
Oh, my hip. But for our first topic, so the anime market is expected to triple in size, positioning Netflix and Crunchyroll as key players in the expansion. Both platforms are investing heavily in anime content, with Netflix exclusive series and Crunchyroll leveraging its deep industry ties. As global demand rises, their combined influence could shape the future of anime distribution and production. And it's said that it could generate nearly $16 billion within the next decade.
That's a lot of money.
Uh-huh. And with the rising global demand, increased streaming investments, and expanding merchandising opportunities driving this boom, it's going to make anime a major force in the entertainment industry.
As if it isn't already.
It isn't already. It isn't already, but it's only for a niche audience. So hence you're gonna see a bit. Hence, there's pushing a lot more anime content out.
No, I'd say anime is pretty mainstream these days among the younger generations.
Yeah. But then it's very selective on what type of anime though. Like we've seen animes being mainstream, but then it peters out entirely.
Let's be honest, there's a lot of anime genres that should never be mainstream.
What do we got in mind?
Oh, just the old classic. Sure, she looks like a 6-year-old, but she's really a 3,000-year-old demon.
Oh no! Yeah, there are some genres you just want to go, what the hell they're doing. But with the success of like live action series like One Piece, you reckon that's contributing to the boom?
No, because One Piece is like the live action animes are a tiny fraction of the originals, and they keep flopping except for, the one or two that don't.
Yeah. And the reason is because most of the series creators don't even step in and go, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing to my What the fuck are you doing to my anime series that I made tirelessly? Why are you twisting this up?" Like if I recall, the One Piece creator told the Netflix people like, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing? Tear it down and do it all over again."
Well, did they?
That's what I recalled. Yeah.
No, but did they tear it down and start again?
Yeah, yeah. Hang on a second. I'm just I'm trying to find the info. I did specifically hear something about this though, but there are some. But you are right. There are some other live actions that were flopped so badly, like the Netflix Death Note, for example.
Cowboy Bebop.
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember that. That was
The live
oh
action Dragon Ball, the live action Avatar.
yeah. Yep.
Look, I could sit here all day telling you about live action that flop.
Like we can like there are some questions like what regions are contributing to the anime's global expansion. I mean, the Western market is contributing to the boom of the anime industry, but then there are also I would also say the Asian regions as well are also to the anime's global industry with the rise of Chinese anime that's coming out.
Yeah, anime is derived from the Japanese word or the Japanese pronunciation of animation, right? So can we actually call Chinese anime? Or is it a Chinese knockoff of anime that should be called its own thing? Or does it get a pass because it's extremely similar to anime, like how people call Avatar anime, even though it was made by a Western company?
Well, the official name for Chinese anime is donghua, which is describes all animated works regardless of style or origin, made in China. However, outside of China and in English, donghua is colloquial for Chinese animation, refers specifically to animation produced in China. That's the official wording of calling it, but everyone prefers to just say Chinese anime. Yeah, but with the with these regions all contributing to the global expansion of anime, one has to wonder though, like how is this booming anime industry going to affect the studios and animators? Because I mean, it's no big secret how the anime industry is they treat their workers in Japan especially.
Do they treat them any better in the rest of the world? Because I've
Uh,
heard a lot of things about how Western animation and CGI studios are
hmm.
being treated terribly by the big companies that contract them.
Yeah, but as a result for in Western animations, they say yes, we acknowledge the problem and try to fix it per se.
Do they though?
Uh, I I I I don't know. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think of an example that they acknowledged the problem and did it. And the closest I can think of is Rooster Teeth when they had when they got called out for treating their animators like shit back in the day, and then after weeks of pressure from the fans, Rooster Teeth came out saying, "Okay, we acknowledge the problem, we acknowledge the concerns, and we will fix this by introducing a couple of people to help streamline the animation process."
Okay, so you've named one company. And are they actually making a change? We don't know. They got shut down.
Yep.
But it's easy to say we're going to make a change. It's hard to actually change the culture of a company.
Yeah, yeah. But the other interesting thing is one can also attribute the growing popularity of anime to the role of social media and fan community and how the Western audience have influenced the way the anime is being made as well. Like you would see like a lot of social media apps and fan communities, they always show like, hey, this guy made an anime edit, or this guy made a music video, or this guy made a video about the theories of your favorite shows, for example.
People do that about live action shows too. That's not
Hmm.
unique to anime at all.
Oh yeah, but there's a lot more discussion about these when it comes to anime.
Is there?
I mean, people still talk about Dragon Ball Z
Yeah.
and the
People still
power.
talk about Breaking Bad.
Yeah, but Breaking Bad is finished though. Like, what can they talk about afterwards? Like, is
Tons
there
of
any
stuff.
such as?
You can talk about the color theory.
Oh,
You know, each character in Breaking Bad wears different colors according to color theory. to
Huh.
represent their different mental states and their position.
Huh. I knew about the color. The color theory. When I think about it now, I do remember there was the scenery changes. Like when they go to Mexico, it's like all like orange and yellowish tinge.
They do that in a lot of American shows.
And so, with all that being said, one could ask, like, how can investors or companies capitalize on the growth of anime?
Make more anime.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. But fair enough.
Make
But the
what people want to watch. If people apparently want to watch anime, then make anime.
but that's gonna be hard. Like, I don't know whether you saw the recent news of what happened in Texas with the banning of anime.
Yeah, that was more like they're banning anime, but the excuse they're using is think of the children.
Hmm.
Which, to be fair, as I mentioned earlier about the 3,000-year-old demons meme, that does come up an uncomfortable amount in some anime.
Yeah.
And it's things like that that give anime a bad perception among the rest of the world. So is Texas banning anime? They're probably not banning all anime. They're also probably not entirely doing it because it's so that link you've put in the chat,
Yeah.
they're saying it's because it's obscene material depicting minors in all media, animated or otherwise.
Yeah.
Now, the reason you could come up with the theory that they're using it to ban all anime, it is Texas, so, they're probably like, gotta get those Japanese things out of Texas. Only have pure American anime in Texas.
I was hoping you would say in a cowboy accent at some point.
Yeehaw!
Oh, by the way, about that One Piece Netflix stuff that the creator said no, it's not good. Reshoot it. So it was basically in July 2023, open letter. Oda stated that there were numerous scenes he felt quote weren't good enough to put out into the world, so the film crew reshot them. Oda also felt some of Leafy's lines did not feel a character on paper. However, he changed his opinions after seeing the the actor's performance on them. But there were a lot of changes from the manga. But yeah, he was not happy initially.
Okay.
But that's the thing, like, back to the Texas stuff. I don't know. It's gonna be hard to how you go like banning all anime in Texas. That's not a good thing to do. That's like you're gonna
They're
take
not
out
banning all anime, though.
the
Like,
guidelines.
the guidelines, they have this article that you've linked points out that they have specific text about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And things that they're not making things that weren't appropriate already inappropriate. They're just making sure that it applies to anime and AI generated content.
But that said, with this lore coming in, do you reckon this will hinder the growth of anime?
I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. The anime that's going to be banned is going to be a small fraction, hopefully, of what exists out there. I don't know. I've never actually looked into counting how often this inappropriate content comes up.
Yeah.
But theoretically, that should only be a small fraction of the anime that gets made. So, yeah, you're not banning much. And the only risk this has to make anime less popular is if people see the law and think all anime's like that. And the only people who do that are people who are already really closed-minded.
Yeah. And the other, also the one thing that will also depend on the growth of anime is whether the upcoming anime projects will have high potential. I mean, there's a new one that's coming out on Netflix, which is the Devil May Cry series, and that has potential. But a lot of the DMC fans are kind of split about it.
Why?
Um,
You can't just say that and not say why. Why are they split about it?
If I recall, some of the dialogue in the series is it's mid. Some are saying that that the opening because the opening theme song for the Devil May Cry series, it's they instead of using the original game tunes, they used Limp Bizkit, and people are like,
Oh
what?
no, Limp Bizkit, it's the end of the world. I don't like Limp Bizkit, but seriously, It's the theme song. It's like the least relevant part of the whole bloody anime. It's
Yeah.
30 seconds of each episode.
Yep. That's fair. That's fair.
It has no bearing on the story or the characters.
I'm looking at one Reddit post about the Devil May Cry from r slash Reddit r slash Devil May Cry, and someone wrote my hopes. It's fun, doesn't deviate too much from the source material while trying some new ideas. Allows me to be affordable to get an affordable 1.5 scale Dante action figure for my M versus MVC collection. My fears. Dialogue isn't bad and loaded with unnecessary swearing just because it's adult oriented. I'm looking at you, Castlevania. Too much reliance on CG for certain action scenes, and it's overall uninteresting and doesn't engage new fans to try the games.
Okay, so that's just somebody's wish list. Woohoo.
But I think that I think it comes down to if the Western audiences can not deviate from the source material, then yeah, you can have it's a potential gold mine. But if they don't, if they don't do it, then yeah, it's not gonna end.
Somebody's gonna whinge no matter what they do. Stop listening to the whingers because they're not the ones giving you money anyway.
Yes, Professor. Although
Listen to
there
the
is
people who are actually buying your product. There are people out there who make it their life to hate something because they want to. They're not buying your product in any significant amount, so don't pander to them. Just make your product.
yeah, make your product sure, but then but then you
Come
have
on,
to
I'm giving you a segue here.
yeah, but then yeah, I agree with you there. But but also explain and say the same thing with the like the creators themselves saying the same thing. Like the Smash Bros. Creators saying the same thing.
Oh, God. I set you up perfectly.
Fuck.
Everyone likes Smash Brothers.
Yes, indeed.
And the developer Masahiro Sakurai has been creating a series of game design videos on YouTube. So he was recently awarded the Art Encouragement Prize from the Japanese government's Agency for Cultural Affairs. And he says that even though it's not his own idea, he thinks it's like not an original thought from him. He thinks that the trend should be that Japanese people should make the things that Japanese people like. And he complains that the success of some games in the West has kicked off a trend of making Americanized work, or by coming up with standards that are adopted as widespread norms by the industry as an outcome of market competition. And he thinks that the people who are overseas who like Japanese games aren't looking for Japanese games made for a Western audience. They're looking for Japanese games made for Japanese people. And Japan's got a huge market for games, so it's really it's not like they have to pander to Americans to reach the biggest market.
Yeah, but the problem is with Japanese games and and Americanized games, it's the whole cultural sensitivity element to it. Like what's allowed in Japan wouldn't be allowed in the West, for example.
That's fine. You're still making games for your Japanese audience.
Yeah.
If you're
Yeah.
not allowed to release it in the West, like, I can't think of anything that I've seen in a Japanese game that wouldn't fly in a Western game. Actually, that does remind me of a Japanese game from, decades ago now, like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There was a Japanese game where you play, like, it was a porno game, really.
Oh.
And it was specifically about non-consensual sex.
Oh shit.
Yeah, you played I remember reading about it when it was banned, because it was banned in Australia, surprise, surprise. And I'm not complaining about this one. Like, there are some things that are just so out of touch from polite society that they shouldn't be part of our media consumption.
Uh-huh.
And in that game, you played as a pervert who finds an opportunity to get revenge on the woman who reported him to the police. I think. I don't know. It's been 20 years since I've heard about it. And it's like, what gets into your head that you think that's an appropriate game to make? But I don't look at that and think all Japanese people are into that, because they're not. And that's something culturally inappropriate in the West that might be more appropriate in Japan. I don't know, but if it is, then what are you doing, Japan? But making games like that isn't just because it's a game, it's not an excuse and it's acceptable in your culture. Not an excuse to make a game like that and then sell it in overseas markets where it's not acceptable in the culture.
Okay, there was a time when Steam, for example, they blocked a lot of they banned a lot of like Japanese games, and people were like, "Hey, what the hell, guys?"
Steam is a private company, they're allowed to do whatever they want. If they don't make enough money, they'll go bankrupt and another company will replace them that is better at making money.
Hmm.
But Valve are very good at making money.
Yeah, it was it was a visual ban. They banned a lot of visual novels. That's right.
Yeah, and wasn't that because there was a lot of questionable content in them? Along the lines of sure, she looks young, but she's really a 3,000-year-old demon?
We're getting into that. We are so
Yeah, because it comes up a lot, and I don't like it.
Yep. Yeah, but what's interesting though is you got that. Okay, you've got that you got those types of games, but then you've got like games like The Last of Us Part 2, which had a really, really that sex scene, fucking hell, and you're like, what the
What's
hell?
wrong with it?
They allowed it, and I'm like, that's really inconsistent here,
I
guys.
haven't played it. What's wrong with the sex scene?
It was like a
The
really
only thing I've seen is a couple of screen captures, and it doesn't look that
gratuitous.
intense or gratuitous. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very gratuitous. When I saw saw the Angry Joe's live stream of that, and I'm like, what the hell?
Well, I also think people get way too hung up on consensual sex scenes and are perfectly okay with like Mortal Kombat finishes.
Yeah,
One is a natural thing that adults do to each other and consent to. The other is a non-consensual ripping off the spine out through your throat. Yeah,
oh,
there's
sorry.
also a difference between having one sex scene that might be a bit gratuitous and having something that is entirely targeted to adults and is entirely sex scenes, which a lot of these visual novels are. There's a lot of adult content and in dating sims and all of that in the form of visual novels.
Professor, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I trailed off. I see why you think I was going to say something, but I just trailed off.
God damn.
Anyway, I don't think there's a problem. If you're making games for your culture,
Hmm.
there's not really a problem with having it be inappropriate in another culture, which is what Sakurai says. He says target the market you want to target, which in this case is the Japanese devs making games for Japanese people. And if other countries want to get in on it, then they can get in on it. If it's not appropriate in that country, it'll get banned.
Yeah, but the problem is trying to get to trying to make games for your market. It's and asking for. It's like trying to ask them like, what do you want, guys? Like, what do you want in the game? And it's so hard to like pinpoint what people want in the game because everyone has differing wishes per se.
I remember when Battlefield 3 did that.
Yeah.
And the forum, it might even have been on 4chan, which would surprise me because 4chan is very not corporate friendly. But they posted, what do you guys want in the next Battlefield? And people turned it into a meme response with replying dinosaurs. So then there's, in Battlefield 3, one of the characters has a toy dinosaur that was given to him by his kids and carries that around with him.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. The other interesting thing with Japan as well is that it's not only the choice they have to make it's not only the choice of like what style of game do they want as well. It's also oh crap, I was gonna say oh crap, I lost my train of thought now.
I didn't know you had one.
Uh-huh. Yeah, okay, there we go. There we go. I would say the production cost of making a game in Japan is much more it's much more cheaper. Was it much more expensive than comparing to the Western games?
Wait, you're saying Japanese games are cheaper than Western games to
Yeah,
make?
I think if I recall correctly.
I don't recall hearing that anywhere, so I'd be interested to see a source if you can get one.
Okay. And and also with when making Japanese games, their censorship is much more stricter than what we get with Western games as well.
Yeah, they've got a similar problem to what Australia had, where there's a very strict Bureau of Classification. And as I was saying earlier, most things I think are fine to, as long as they're targeted at the correct age range. Then there are a few things like that game, which I'm still trying to remember the name of, and I'm not Googling it because I don't want that in my search history, which are not appropriate and should never have been released. 0 points, may God have mercy on your soul. So, if games are cheaper to make in Japan, it's probably because of Japan's totally screwed work culture,
Yeah.
where they're working like 15-hour days and sleeping under their desks and all of that to make it look like they work hard.
Someone wrote also with the Japanese games as well. Japanese games are just better in terms of American games, and it's because of a lot of things. And I've just found I saw an interesting article on Quora like saying why are Japanese video game developers considered to be better than the American ones, and they listed
Because of weebs.
well, that too. There's the cultural influence and innovation, attention to detail, narrative depth, nostalgia and legacy, diverse game genres, and community engagement.
And all of those are things that Western developers do too.
They do
You can
too.
cherry pick developers from any country and say, why are this country's games better than another country's?
Yeah.
But you can't make a blanket statement like that because it's not true.
Hmm.
There are good and bad games from every country, and we're not seeing the shitty little cash grab games that Japan makes because
Oh
they
yeah.
don't get localized.
Oh yeah.
We're only seeing the really good stuff because it's got to be good to be worth putting the money into to localize.
Yeah.
The same as in Japan, they're not going to get every shitty little cash grab game that gets made in the West because, again, you've got to localize it. And it's more than that. The cash grab games aren't made with a love of making games, they're made with a love of money.
Yep. Yep.
So no one is going to talk about them in 10 or 20 years. People still talk about Final Fantasy because those games were made with a love of making games.
Yeah. And the nostalgia as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of nostalgia for Final Fantasy now that it's like 35 years old now, isn't it?
You mean FF7?
No, the first one.
First was
1987.
Damn.
It's an old game.
But okay, even though Final Fantasy, it's as a whole, it's 37 years. People still go back to Final Fantasy 7 as the go-to game.
Yeah, there's a few reasons for that. It was a
Yeah.
huge graphical leap.
Yeah,
It had a deep story.
the nostalgia purposes, as we just
Well, you don't nostalgia over something that was bad when it came out. At least not as hard as you nostalgia over something that was amazing when it came out.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, E.T. the game. That was, even though that was nostalgic, it was pretty hilariously bad.
No one nostalgias over that game. They buried it in a bloody desert. That's the only reason anybody cares about it. Because it single-handedly crashed the American games industry, and they dumped it in a desert.
Yeah, I know. That's why, and people, and after so many years of being dumped into the desert, people started to play that game, and they go like, "Oh, I remember this game. This was the shittiest game I ever played."
Yeah, but they're not doing it because they're nostalgic for it. They're doing it because it's a meme that it was so bad.
Yeah.
It was so incredibly bad that it destroyed the games industry, basically.
Yeah.
Not just in the US, but it crashed it worldwide.
Wait, I did not know it crashed worldwide though. That's
Yeah, that's why the Nintendo Famicom was designed to look more like a VCR player when it came across to America as the NES. Because people would think of a VCR player and have good thoughts. People would look at a gaming console and think games are shit because of ET. So yes, it was mostly in the US, but it was a worldwide ripple effect.
Yeah, I can totally see it. Why the Famicom looks like a damn VCR.
No, the Famicom doesn't. The NES does.
Okay,
But the NES is basically a Western Famicom, minus a few features.
Yep.
Funnily enough, the Famicom was also a response to the crash because it wasn't just a game console; it was also a computer. It was designed to be a to be more of a home computer. Even though it was primarily a gaming console, they also had to build it into the design that it was going to be sort of a computer to make it so they could market it.
Huh.
Because at the time, the games industry had just crashed and no one was buying just a games console.
I know we're veering off from the original topic, but you reckon given what we're seeing in the West right now with the layoffs and studio closures and all that's happening in the Western market, you reckon the Japanese gaming market, oh well, not Japanese, the Asian gaming market, primarily Japan and China, for example, do you reckon it could save the gaming industry from getting crashed again?
No, I think they're making a lot of the same mistakes that Western studios are. Just there's a bit of a lag time because as long as I've been paying attention to it, it feels like, and this is take this with a grain of salt because this is just an opinion. It feels like the Japanese and Chinese studios are pumping out the same shitty cash grabs as the West are, just with a couple of years of lag for them to get infected by the money at all cost mindset. Like Konami,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
they used to make really good games. And then they decided that they weren't going to bother making good games anymore and they were just going to make cash grabs.
Yeah, and as a result, Kojima left that company in very bitter circumstances, if I recall.
Yeah, and the final Metal Gear game was basically unfinished because they pushed it out, and Kojima went on to make Death Stranding, which is a masterpiece from what I've played so far. I need to get back into that. I stopped because I hit a bug where I would crash every time I tried to make some of the P bombs. That is a real thing in the game. There's something special about Sam Bridges' P, so they can use it to make weapons against the ghost things. My terminology is way out of there because I've forgotten what all of the. I haven't played in a few years.
I like how this episode is just going adult only at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, every time I tried to make a.
Just say urine bomb. Just say urine bomb.
No, I'm going to say P bomb. Every time I tried to make one of them, the game would crash. So I put it down for a while, thinking I'd get back into it and try again once it had been patched. And I never remembered to get back into it. And looking at the timeline here, it might actually be that there's no lag in between when Western companies started to throw out cash grabs and when the Japanese companies did, because Konami fired Kojima in 2012, which was a bit earlier than I remembered it being. I think that as long as there are people making games for the love of games, there won't be another crash like there was in 1983 because the cost of distribution is so low.
Yeah.
Part of the reason that it was so hard to break into the industry in the 80s is that the cost of distribution was so high, you'd have to, if you wanted to make a console game, you had to create cartridges, which were really unique to the console that they were made for. So you're not just porting the game across, you're also making hardware, and hardware gets expensive fast. PC gaming had the advantage that you could just print a floppy disk. And there were some YouTubers who have made modern games. I don't watch them anymore because found out he's a bit of a nut job. But 8-Bit Guy made a series of Commodore games. And please don't sue me, 8-Bit Guy. He made Commodore games and self-published by copying the floppies.
Yeah.
Because he could still track down new old stock floppies. And yeah, he basically set up a rig that had a couple of drives and he could plug them in and copy the game across to the floppies. Because floppies were relatively cheap compared to making a making a cartridge. That's the word, a cartridge.
Boy, wow, that took a while.
Yes, I'll never forgive the 8-Bit Guy for plugging in that computer, that rare one-of-a-kind prototype computer, without checking the capacitors to make sure they weren't going to explode and blowing up the computer.
Oh shit! Did that actually happen?
Yes, it did.
Oh no!
And then I realized, hey, this guy is like I'm an amateur, but I admit that this guy's an amateur and he's pretending to know everything. And I stopped watching. Because I realized, there'd been other things he'd done that that were really risky and unprofessional when it comes to repairing vintage tech. And then I found out that he's a gun nut who likes to carry his gun around because it intimidates people.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, depending on what state. Oh, it's Texas. So yeah, Texas has got the open carry case laws, I think.
Yeah, but he actually had it was a great big gun, and
Oh.
he was carrying it on his on a sling over his back. And he has the right to carry the gun, and he has the right to freedom of speech and all that because
Mm-hmm.
it's Texas and they have rights and they're very proud of their gun rights and all that.
Yep.
But he was making a big deal. He was like, "Look at me, I'm a big man with a big gun. It really upsets the gun control people, so I keep doing this." And
We are so gonna get sued for this.
yeah,
So let's not talk more about this.
yeah. So I'm really disappointed in the kind of person he is. But if you're a big YouTuber, it seems like you have to be a bit messed up in the head.
Yeah, yeah. Not as messed up as those space astronauts. Eh? Eh?
Eh, okay, I'll give you half points.
So you must have heard the recent news of the astronauts that have been there in space for how many months now?
9 months, which isn't a record by any means, but
Hmm.
it's a lot longer than the week-long mission they were on when they testing out the Boeing Starliner when they found out that it has a massive design flaw and was not safe to be flying.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
imagine being on a road trip and getting halfway out into the desert and there's no way for anyone to come and rescue you and finding out that your car was designed to break down?
Oh, that'd be terrible.
Yeah. So it's lucky that, they were able to get to the ISS and hang out there for the last 9 months. And because it's NASA, they're not going to waste time just sitting around. They're going to get them in to do science and stuff.
But
But
the
it turns
amount,
out it's really bad for your health.
yeah. And I also remembered like there initially it was like, okay, we'll bring him home in 2 months, and then it was and then it was initially it was 2 weeks, then it became 2 months, and then it became something else if I recall. Like the number, like the return dates were changing constantly.
Yeah, well, these missions take a long time to. And since they were on the ISS anyway, there wasn't really an urgent need to bring them home. This isn't the Martian situation.
Well, I was thinking more of the house guests that would they'll come into the house and overstay their welcome kind of scenario.
Yeah, but it's also their house in a way.
Yeah, fair, fair. But yeah, they suffered a lot of health issues, didn't they, from this?
Yeah, microgravity is really bad for your bones.
Really? And how in what way? I mean, is it because of the lack of blood flow going to the bones in a sense?
No, it's not because of that particularly. It's more that being in space, there's no gravity pulling you downwards. Well, there's gravity, but you don't feel it because you're in
Zero gravity.
zero G. Yes, but the gravity is still having an effect on you. Basically, you're just falling at the same rate everything else is. So
Hmm.
you don't feel the gravity. The way to get into orbit is to fall at the ground and miss. But the initial issues are that without the loading of gravity on your body as you walk around, your legs and your arms really, your whole body will atrophy because you're not using your muscles,
Yeah.
and your bones will also atrophy because you're not using them, which is so they're basically getting a form of osteoporosis because there's no gravity rather than because they're elderly or any of the other causes of osteoporosis. So they come back to Earth and they're really weak because they haven't had to walk around on their full weight for the last 9 months,
Yeah.
which is some early missions like Apollo 11 were set up so that if everything went wrong and they landed in they could be a couple of days to get to them and rescue them. So they had to take really hardcore survival training. And in the 60s and 70s, before it was so easy to get around the world and rescue people after they come back from space if they landed in the wrong spot, the Soviets even had guns on board their spaceships
Oh
just
shit.
in case they landed in bear country.
Oh, okay. That's
And the idea was that, if you land in the Siberian wilderness, at least you can hunt for food and protect yourself.
okay. I was thinking more like, oh crap, we landed in Mars. Quick, get out the guns, folks.
Yeah, so I'm not sure how they were supposed to be able to get out of their spacecraft and hop around and find food without rehabilitating to Earth. But I guess back then missions weren't as long, so that they didn't have to worry about it as much.
And plus, I think back in the day, the percentage of success back then, it wasn't that big either. When like the chances of survival was slim to none.
I mean, they never really, except in the case of, I'm sorry, I don't remember his name anymore. Komarov, I think? I'm just going to look that up. Yes, Vladimir Komarov. The majority of space missions have been successful. There's only been like a couple of dozen deaths in the space program, and a lot of them actually happen. Like, you'd think most of them would happen in the early days when the spaceships were not as robust and they were still learning. In Komarov's case, he was a cosmonaut who was pushed into a launch because the government wanted a launch for the anniversary of their first launch, and they weren't ready to go. So they launched him, and on the way back down, his spacecraft failed. The parachutes didn't deploy properly, and he crashed into the ground and died. There's actually quite a dark photo on the internet of the remains of his body, which after the crash and the burning and all of that were just a charred lump, basically.
Oh,
Yeah, I should have saved this for a messed up moment in science, really.
oh
But
shit! I'm seeing it now.
yeah,
Bloody hell!
they
Oh,
insisted on having an open casket funeral so that the officials would have to face what they'd done by sending an astronaut and a cosmonaut into space without being prepared. So yeah, there were a lot of deaths in the early days of the space program, but a lot of them actually happened in the last couple of decades with the space shuttle because it carries so many people. So yeah, there's I wouldn't say that the early missions were that much more dangerous than the newer missions, but since they're getting longer, the impact of being in space is getting bigger.
but yeah, I'm seeing some of the other effects that affect other effects in space, such as the risk of developing kidney stones, bone loss, neuroocular syndrome, for example. You can't see much in space.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think it's because of the fluids in your body
Hmm.
not being pulled down anymore by gravity.
Yeah.
So they naturally drift into your head. It basically changes the shape of your eyeballs. And that's why a lot of astronauts wear glasses.
Okay. By the way, have you there's a picture of the before and after. I'm not sure whether you've also seen it as well of the astronauts.
Yep.
Oh man, they look damn.
Yeah, they don't look bad, but you can definitely tell that they have
The
had a lot of
microgravity is
physical strain.
yeah, the microgravity did a number on them.
Yeah, so also keep in mind, I think Sunny Williams looks a lot older than she did before because she's been in space. She doesn't have access to hair dye and makeup because in the photos you've linked, you can see she's got a lot more grey hair.
Yep.
And I don't think that's a side effect of being in space for 9 months. The fun one is you actually get a bit taller in space because your spine isn't compressed by gravity.
Yeah.
There was a really interesting twin study into some astronauts where one of them went to space and one stayed home. And they found out that even things like his epigenetics were changed.
Wait, what do you mean by epigenetic?
How your genetics are expressed. So they
Yeah.
took two twins who had both gone through the astronaut training, and they didn't send one of them to space while they spent the other on a 1 year trip. And then, because they were both fairly similar to begin with, having gone through the astronaut training program, So you're looking at two, so not just that they're genetically identical, but they're also physiologically very similar. And the key points of the study, according to this article from NASA, are that within 6 months, Scott's gene expression returned to almost normal, more than 90% of his baseline. The degree of epigenetic changes observed in Scott in space was no greater than that observed in Mark, which, okay, that contradicts what I was just saying then. Obviously, take the NASA statement more than you believe me. But epigenetics is basically how your genes are expressed and how they affect how your body functions, and can be changed by what you go through as a person. You think of your DNA as a fixed thing, but it's not really. It can be affected by what you eat, exposure to stress, and tons of different stuff. They also noted that the flu vaccine works in space exactly like on Earth, so being in space doesn't affect your immune system.
Okay, that's good.
And Scott's microbiome remained the same as a stressed person on Earth. So they measured the change in his microbiome, which are the bacteria that live inside your body, particularly in your digestive system. And yeah, it turns out being stressed is as bad for you as going to space. Or going to space is as bad for you as being stressed. I don't know how to take that.
So on the day, Professor, you go to space, you'll be like, "Oh crap, I'm stressing myself out from this."
Well, yeah. I wonder how much of that is because being in space is stressful and how much is because of the microgravity.
I think I think the stress is more of the whether this space shuttle will hold you or not, because we're still in the well, I wouldn't say we're still in the infancy of space exploration and whatnot. So
I mean, people have been going to space for like more than 60 years now.
yeah.
I'm not sure I'd say we're early into space exploration.
So in other words, this twin study is saying that, oh yes, nothing really changed. It doesn't really change much, but things do get to normal in the end.
Yeah, there's not a huge change, but you will mostly go back to normal. I think the big risk is the radiation, because being in space, you're further from the Earth, you don't have the protection of the atmosphere, or if you go far enough out, you lose the protection of the magnetic field.
Yeah.
So it puts you at a higher risk of cancer and other cellular damage.
Yeah, that's interesting. They were also saying that the radiation could accelerate the aging process as well. So hence the whole look older than she is.
I don't think that's, like I said earlier, I think that's more of a
Aesthetic look. Yeah,
aesthetic look than a physical change, because I don't think 9 months is enough to age as much as she appears to have aged in the photos. So I think it's more that, things like hair dye and makeup aren't exactly high priorities on your space mission.
Yeah.
And if we look at the before photo, it doesn't look like a
I mean, here's the article that you
oh no,
posted.
looking at it again, sorry, the before photo does come from just before the mission. She's in her spacesuit.
Yeah.
But yeah, to me, most of the aging that you can see on Sunny Williams is in the hair. And that just, to me, says that she normally dyes her hair and doesn't in space. It's harder to tell with Butch because he doesn't have much hair to begin with. And he's still wearing his helmet in the after photo, so we can't see if he's gone grey.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think they look like they've aged that much after only 9 months.
So, given what we've seen so far, with the health impacts of being in space, you reckon this will force space companies in the future to go, okay, we should make the space travel much more comforting to the human body now that we've seen what 9 months can do a human body.
Yeah, it's something we've got to look at for long-term space exploration. And I think the big factors are going to be radiation shielding and artificial gravity. Because if you have artificial gravity, you can walk around as normal. You won't have the osteoporosis or muscle loss. and will also protect you from the effects of having all of the fluid in your body in your skull,
Yeah.
rather than draining out with gravity.
And plus, with given how far you have to travel to in space, for example, let's say if you want to travel from Earth to Mars, it's how many years is it for to travel from Earth to Mars? Like a full years or something like that.
I think under the optimum transfer path, it's only about 3 months.
9 months.
Okay.
Huh. So yeah, that's. I think that they might use the both of their recovery as an example of like, okay, this is what the human body could 9 months in space. Like, I
Yeah.
wonder if that
So a mission to Mars, if they launch using that 9 month
window.
window, when they arrive on Mars, they would have similar issues to what Butch and Sunny have on Earth. Possibly less of an impact because the gravity on Mars is less than on Earth. But even if you were able to just turn around and come home, it would take you. Let's just really simplify this. It's harder than that because you've got to deal with the Earth and Mars drifting apart and coming back at a suboptimum launch window. Because here it says that every 2 years, 2 months, Earth and Mars are in the optimum location for a return or for a mission. So you don't want to have to get to Mars after 9 months and turn around. It'll probably take you longer to get back than it did to get there. And when you arrive home after you've spent your mission on Mars,
Yeah.
however long that is, you've also been exposed to a shitload of radiation. So yeah, it's an interesting problem. How do you get to Mars and back without killing your astronauts?
Yep.
You could have a spinning spacecraft to provide artificial gravity, which would protect you from the
The radiation.
from the 0G. Radiation is much harder to deal with because basically the only way to protect yourself from radiation is with mass. You need a lot of something in between you and the radiation to stop it from getting to you.
Would lead? I know lead is normally the one item that could prevent radiation from attacking your the passengers and whatnot. Would that help the situation? I mean, a lot of lead would the mass of radiation. Would that help? Or would
Lead
it?
is a good choice for blocking radiation,
Mm,
but it is so heavy.
yeah.
What I've read about is that a lot of missions, like hypothetical missions, have talked about using water because water is a very good radiation blocker and it's also easy to handle and it can form part of the rest of your life support
Okay.
because you need the water anyway. So if you put the tanks in the walls of your spacecraft, you can use it as radiation shielding.
Okay. Yeah. See that?
Yeah, I recommend the book Delta V by Daniel Suarez. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it on this show before,
Yep.
but it's about asteroid miners, and it goes into a lot of the problems of long distance space travel because they go out further than Mars and have to deal with a lot of the same problems.
Okay. Anyways, on that note, we'll take a break and we'll be back with the shout outs and the wacky movie. And this episode is supported by our lovely people at Res, the gaming energy drink. Tell us more about the Res drink, Professor.
Res is a gaming themed energy drink that promises to help you maintain your mental concentration and focus, relieve weariness and fatigue, decrease mental and cognitive fatigue, and reduce eye strain. And it does that by containing a whole bunch of active ingredients, including caffeine, ginseng, brahmi, marigold, vitamin B. We've got a couple of cans of it here that we've been drinking, and it tastes really good.
Nice. And if you use the code NERDS15, that is NERDS15, we'll give you a 15% off site-wide discount on all Res products. That is 15% off, folks. And you can do that by checking out the website www.drinkres.com. That is www.drinkres.com. Res, don't leave home without it.
Or do, I'm not your mum.
So, anyways, on to our shout outs. On the 16th of March 2025, it's 15th anniversary of Metroid 2033. I was going to say Metroid for some reason.
Yes, very different.
Yep. It's Metroid 2023 is a 2010 first-person shooter survival horror game developed by 4A Games and published by THQ. The story is based on Dmitry Glukovsky's novel. Thank you. Glukovsky's novel of the same name, where survivors of a nuclear war have taken refuge in the metro tunnels of Moscow. Players control the silent protagonist, Artem, a man who must save his home station from the
It's
dangers.
Artyom,
Artyom, okay.
not Artem.
Thank you. From the dangers lurking within the metro. In the game, players can encounter human and mutant enemies who can be killed with a variety of firearms. Players must also wear a gas mask to explore areas covered in nuclear radiation, both underground and on the surface. You've played this game, right, Professor?
I've played it a lot,
Oh, yeah?
and the sequels.
Okay, so how is Metro 2023 like from a player's perspective?
Incredibly immersive if you play it on the harder difficulty with the UI off. I really like the world building, and I think it has a lot to say about the state of humanity,
Okay, that's
particularly if you read the books.
fair. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
But the game, the gunplay is great. Having to manage your your gas mask filters while you're on the surface is great. In fact, I was really disappointed with Metro Awakening not spending much time on the surface, which is the VR game that was made last year. And yeah, there's a ton of interesting design, interesting world building, great characters, and I'm really excited to see what the next game is, which they're still working on despite the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Yeah, half the team moved to Malta, and it seems like because they were a Ukrainian team, it's become quite an international effort, because initially it was a Ukrainian game developer making a game based on a Russian author's book. Since the war in Ukraine, the game developers fled to Malta. I'm pretty sure the author is in England. He's been declared an enemy of Russia, so he can't ever go home.
Oh, damn.
And they're still working to put together a fifth game in the series.
Yeah.
But it's the Malta team who are working on Metro now. The team in Ukraine have, for some reason, split from the Malta team and are working on a entirely different game that also looks really exciting, but feels a bit out of their wheelhouse. It's set in South America.
Oh, okay. But the interesting part with this game, I'm looking at reflecting on the game a year after the release. THQ's vice president Danny Bilson admitted that the game was not quite properly supported in all areas, singling out problems with product development and marketing. Bilson also described the game as, quote, an orphan stepchild, as the publishing agreement with 4A Games was signed late in development, leaving less time to properly market the title before release.
Yeah, the first game didn't get the most marketing, and it was a bit of a cult classic, but since the sequels came out, it's gotten so much bigger.
On the 20th of March 1916, Albert Einstein submits his paper, The Foundation of the General Theory of Relativity, which establishes general theory of relativity, to the journal Annales de Physique. So for the uninitiated, general relativity, also known as the general theory of relativity as Einstein's theory of gravity, is the geometric theory of gravitation published by Albert Einstein in 1910 and is the current description of gravitation in modern physics. It generalizes specific relativity and refines Newton's law of universal gravitation, providing a unified description of gravity as a geometric property of space and time, or four-dimensional space-time. So you're familiar with the whole theory of relativity, weren't you? Are you?
On a surface level.
Fair enough.
I mean, I haven't studied physics since high school.
Yeah.
I just follow it for fun in my spare time.
That's fair. So, even taken as in general relativity is rich with possibilities for further exploration, mathematical relativists seek to understand the nature of singularities and the fundamental properties of Einstein's equations, while numerical relativists run increasingly powerful computer simulations, such as those describing merging black holes. In February 2016, it was announced that the existence of gravitational waves was directly detected by the Advanced LIGO team on 14th of September 2015. A century after its introduction, general relativity remains a highly active area of research.
Yeah, there's a lot of science that has been based on general relativity that can't really be proven one way or another without some sort of experiment, and we're only really getting to the point of being able to do those experiments now.
Yeah. So, Professor, what's a messed up moment in nerddom this week?
You asked for it.
I dare you! I double dare you!
Have you ever heard of the brand Quaker Oats?
Yes, I have.
Really? I'm surprised. They're an American brand.
Eh.
Well, there was a school in the US called Fernald State School, and it was originally called the Massachusetts. I can say words. The Massachusetts School for the Feeble-Minded.
Uh-huh.
So it was for basically a boarding school for mentally disabled children. And along with that, it had horrible treatment of the children. And they had a science club, which you'd think, a science club in a school would be people working with scientists or learning more about science. No, between the late 1940s and the early 1950s, the scientists, particularly Robert Harris, a professor of nutrition at MIT, led 3 different studies on 74 Fernald boys between the ages of 10 and 17 and fed them. In one study, they were fed oatmeal and milk laced with radioactive iron and calcium, and in another study, directly injected with the radioactive calcium.
Oh, what the hell? And the
Yeah.
kids, wait, come on. Wait, let me ask you. Did the school sign any consent forms or anything like that saying like I consent to this or anything like that, or was this just openly done?
The school was in on it.
Oh shit! What the hell?
And the reason Quaker Oats is involved is because Quaker Oats helped to fund the study.
So
And they were basically trying to prove that their food was healthier and supplied the cereal to MIT and helped fund them for the research so that they could get these kids to eat radioactive material and then measure what happened to the radiation.
Oh, Jesus.
The point is that by using radioactive elements, you can track to see where those elements end up. You basically look for the radiation and there's your culprit. And that has a valid use in science for consenting adults.
But not kids. Come on.
Not kids who are mentally disabled and can't consent to a medical study anyway.
Oh, gee. And this was when? This was the 1950s. Damn.
Yeah. And it was really just to prove that Quaker Oats were healthier for you than the competing product. And at a Senate hearing, David Litster of MIT said that the experiment only exposed the boys to about 170 to 330 milligrams of radiation, which is about the same as 30 consecutive chest x-rays. So
Wow.
that's not good for you. You're not supposed to get 30 consecutive chest x-rays.
What? Can you know what's the scariest part about this whole thing though? It's not just the fact that that the school's in on it. The scariest part is that a cereal company acted like big pharma. Let that sink in. A cereal company.
Yeah, so, yet another example of inappropriate, unethical research. And sure, it helps with, it was useful science in this case. A lot of the time, unethical research isn't useful.
Uh-huh.
Like, a lot of the Nazi research was found later on to be basically pointless. It was basically just for them to torture the prisoners.
Yeah.
So, but that's not a redeeming factor. Just because you're doing it for science and it's useful research doesn't make it a redeeming factor for conducting unethical experiments.
Yeah. Thanks to you, Professor. Now I'm not gonna look at the breakfast cereal the same anymore. I mean, like,
I know.
I'm gonna totally avoid the breakfast cereal aisle now. Like, oh fuck. Like, even I bet you there'll be some dirty secrets for the Cocoa Pops on our next episode. Oh dear. No. Don't do it now. Save it for the next one when you're doing it again, okay? Save
Yeah,
it.
I'm just Googling that now to see if there's any sort of. I will save it for next time if I find anything. But I'm having a look to see if there's anything about Cocoa Pops.
Okay. Oh shit. Oh shit. Alright, anyways, on to our wacky movie. On the 20th of March 2020, the platform premiered in a whole host of countries around the world. It enjoyed its debut on streaming, and this was directed by Galda Gastulu Ratia. This sci-fi horror starred Ivan Masagu, Zorian Aguilera, and Antonio San Juan. According to so here's the plot summary. Vertical prison with one cell per level, two people per cell, only one food platform, and 2 minutes per day to feed. An endless nightmare trapped in the hole.
Yeah, that's not the best description of it. Basically, there's some sort of prison that functions as a vertical tower with no windows, so it could be underground for all we know. And a floating platform comes down through a hole in the roof and exits through a hole in the floor every day. But it only stops for 2 minutes at each level. And the two people on each level have that 2 minutes to grab as much food as they want. And the people on top hoard the food, the people on the bottom starve to death.
Oh, damn. So yeah, apparently the director says that the film's key message is that humanity will have to move toward toward the fair distribution of wealth, exploring the importance of individual initiative in driving political change. The screenplay is adapted from a theater script by David De Sola and Pedro Riviero, to which more action and physical elements were added to make it suitable for a film. Extensive rewriting was required to convert the unproduced theater script into a screenplay. The director said that it was a, quote, torturous ordeal as the writers defended the artistic vision and did not want some of the changes to be made.
I'd be interested to read the original script then.
The concrete prison cells were made for the production in a Red Cross facility in the port of Ballyboe, and the director asked for cells that looked economical, robust, and impregnable, which emphasized a sense of architectural and engineering proportion. Only 2 tiers of concrete cells were built. The appearance of many tiers of cells extending above and below each cell was added in post-production using visual effects. The director says the vertical tower of cells represent the dehumanized coldness of the vertical self-management center. The director states that the film's lavish food was treated as another character in the story, one that is aesthetically antagonistic to the architecture of the prison. The luxurious displays of gourmet food were presented on facilities worthy tableware to depict, quote, excessive, almost erotic, opulent desire that is eventually desecrated once the near-empty platform reaches the abject, starving inmates on the lower levels. I can see it, like from a light and dark perspective.
Yeah, it's a really visually striking movie.
The director acknowledges the film can be difficult to watch, but he says the purpose of this approach is to generate discussion and debate by viewers about the political message. When asked about the film's brutal violence and cannibalism, the director explained that the prison is, quote, is a reflection of our society, so it couldn't hide the violence. It had to show how we rip each other apart. Damn.
Oh, I hope that was just my internet because you just turned into a robot.
Uh-huh. The Vertical Self-Management Center is an obvious allegory for society which those at the top provide the best of everything and a willingness to consume far more than necessary at the expense of those below, while those at the lowest levels of society must suffer and go without. This can apply to society within a country or the worldwide society of the first world country. It also attempts to show the revolutionary change within a capitalist society doesn't happen spontaneously, since most people have no class consciousness and live complacent lives. And since there are 333 cell levels, There are 2 prisoners in each cell. The total of number of prisoners is 666. So the prison is basically hell itself. Oh, and by the way, I think you said something about the dimensions of the prison. The movie establishes 6 meters, more or less 20 feet height per level. Since it is revealed at the end of the movie that the pit has 333 levels, it's 1,998 meters, which is feet deep, including level 0 and final basement after level 333. A space in black about 3 levels high. 3 levels high. The pit is 2,022 meters, which is 1,700 feet deep. That is very, very specific.
Yep.
That's one hell of a prison. Would this be classed as a supermax prison?
No, because Supermax refers to the security,
Hmm.
not the size.
Ah, okay. Anyways, that's all we have for this week. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and all the other fun social media sites and audio platforms. And stay happy, stay nerdy. See you guys.
Look after yourselves and stay hydrated, and we'll see you next week.